Okay, let's get started. Good morning and welcome everyone to our press conference today. My name is Rosita Suvenson and I work as the Communication Program Officer for the Human Spaceflight and Operations in the European Space Agency. And with me today I have ESA astronaut Andreas Mogensen and Dr. Nigel who is working in the ESA Corporate Education Program. Before we start with the presentation, I just want to give you a little bit of an outline of the program today here at the International Press Center. Follow the presentations of Andreas and Nigel. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers. The presentations will be in English because we have international press and I have English-speaking colleagues with me. But once we move from the presentations to the question and answers, you can also address your questions to Andreas in Danish if you prefer. Once we finish the question and answers, we will also give an opportunity for individual interviews. Please come to me if you would like to talk with Andreas. Please let me know also if you have an interest to talk with Nigel and some of my colleagues that I will present for you later that is also in the public. If you have your mobile phone and it's switched on, I would kindly ask you to all switch it off or put it on mute. And with that, I will stop my talk for now and pass the word to Andreas, who is not having a presentation at the moment.
Good morning and welcome. Unfortunately, we have a bent pin in one of the connectors, so it keeps dropping out, but we'll try to get it fixed, and hopefully the presentation will work. If you try to pull it a little bit that way, sometimes it works a little bit. Okay, well, I'll get started anyway, and hopefully the presentation will catch up. My name is Andreas Mogensen, and I'm an astronaut with the European Space Agency. I was selected in 2009 together with 5 other European astronauts. This was the first selection of the European Space Agency for new astronauts since 1992. And since 2009, I've been busy training, first in what's called basic training, and then later in pre-assignment training, and then since last August when I was assigned to my first mission, I've been busy 100% of my time with preparations for my first mission ever to the International Space Station. The launch is less than a year away now. It's on the 1st of September 2015, so I'm at the moment very busy with training. I just came from Star City in Russia and will be going back there on Sunday for more Soyuz training. So the destination of my mission, along with all other missions at the moment, is of course the International Space Station. One of my colleagues is currently up there at the moment, Alexander Gerst. He's a ESA astronaut from Germany. He's been up there since May, and yesterday he participated in, or is it 2 days ago now, a spacewalk where he went out with his NASA colleague Reed Wiseman to replace and perform some repairs. And before him last year, Luca Parmitano, also from my class of 2009, was up there. Samantha Cristoforetti, the third from our class, will launch in about just over a month on the 23rd or 24th of November, and then I'll follow her as the fourth from our class next year. Now, the International Space Station is the most complex structure that we've ever assembled in low Earth orbit, and it is a fantastic research laboratory that we really get a tremendous amount of use out of. It flies at an altitude of about 400 kilometers, which means that in a 24-hour period, the astronauts get to experience 16 sunrises and sunsets. So it's really a fantastic place, not only for Earth observation, but also to do groundbreaking science. And 2015, next year, is really going to be an exciting time on board the International Space Station. 2 astronauts, a NASA astronaut and a Russian cosmonaut, will each spend a whole year on board the space station. And this is in, well, preparation, you can say, for the future. Not only do we do a lot of sort of what you in Danish call grundforskning as a basic research, but we also use the ISS as a test bed for further exploration. in preparation for the future. And if one day we return to the moon or the asteroids or the Mars, it'll be for longer periods of time, and it's important that we understand the long-term effects of weightlessness on the human bodies. So next year, 2015, is really a sort of an extra step in that direction, where we will try to understand or to see what happens to the human body when you spend a whole year in space under the influence of weightlessness. Now, that 1 year long mission is also what's given rise to my mission next year, because the thing is, with the Soyuz spacecraft, which we use to travel back and forth from the space station, it only has a lifetime in space of about 6 months. So that means that halfway through the 1 year mission, we need to change out the Soyuz for the 2 crew members, and that's where I come in, together with my 2 crewmates who will launch in September. We'll launch on a fresh Soyuz spacecraft. Soyuz is the Russian capsule that you see behind me. We'll go up, we'll dock to the space station. We'll stay there for about 10 days, and then we will leave our new Soyuz for them to return 6 months later, and then we'll return in their old 6-month-old spacecraft. So in that sense, this mission is connected to the, in support of the year-long mission. And what that gives me the opportunity to be, of course, is a co-pilot on board Soyuz, which is really exciting, and one of the reasons why I'm spending so much time in Russia, learning how to fly the Soyuz manually in case anything good should go wrong. It's fully automatic, but the astronauts, we can take full manual control and dock it to the space station, and also land it in case anything should go wrong. So it's a fantastic opportunity for me to learn how to fly a completely new type of vehicle. But of course, when I'm up there, we're going to take this opportunity and get as much science and research done as possible. As I said, I'll be up there for about 10 days, and we'll have a packed program of science. A lot of that science is about understanding the effects of weightlessness on the human body. We know that weightlessness influences your bone density, and the amount of muscle that you have. Both density and muscle mass tends to decrease the longer you spend in space. There's also some other effects on the eye. The vision can change. Your immune system can change. And so what we're trying to understand is how we can counteract some of these effects, so that if we one day send people, for example, to Mars, which is a 2 to 3 year mission, we'll be able to ensure that the astronauts return safely to the Earth. So what we'll do is, I'll, like many of the astronauts that have come before me, I'll serve as a guinea pig. We'll take blood samples, muscle samples, and study that during both before the mission, during the mission, and after the mission. And then we can compare that with the astronauts that stay 6 months in space. We can also compare it with those that stay a whole year in space. And in that way, hopefully we'll understand better the effects of long-term weightlessness. And of course, that has not only an influence on the future of manned spaceflight, but it also has helps us here on the Earth to understand some of the causes that lie behind different diseases. Just this year, you might have heard of a group of Danish researchers. They sent cancer cells into space in order to see what effect weightlessness has on cancer cells. And by understanding how cells change in space, we can better understand how to affect them, how to maybe mitigate some of the disease responses that the human body goes through here on Earth. In addition to science, this mission, because it's a shorter mission, also gives us the opportunity to run it in a completely different manner than the longer traditional 6-month missions. The ISS has been permanently manned since November 2000, and so obviously we have a very good system in place for the astronauts to work, but we obviously in the future we want to try to effectivize this, optimize it, and see if we can improve that, some of the ways that we work in. And this mission will give us a chance to run that in a little bit different, by using some mobile technologies, which will give the astronauts real-time communications with principal investigators here on Earth that can in a way, look over the shoulder of the astronauts and assist them in real time. We'll also try to use other technologies, for example, a skin suit, to mitigate some of the effects of weightlessness. Astronauts in general can grow all the way up to 4 or 5 centimeters in the span of 6 months, simply because there's no gravitational force on the spine, so the spine tends to elongate, which can lead to back problems. So one thing we'll try is to use a skin suit to see if we can counteract some of that spinal elongation, which in the future could prove beneficial to the health of astronauts. And on top of that, again, in looking towards the future, when astronauts might be controlling rovers on the surface of the moon or on the surface of Mars, we have a couple different experiments where I'll be controlling rovers here on the surface of Earth. And of course, this being the first ESA mission with a Danish astronaut on board, this is also a fantastic opportunity to involve the Danish public. And I'm glad to have Nigel here with me. He'll talk about some of the educational outreach opportunities, some of the competitions that we have lined up for kids and students of all ages. But one thing I just wanted to mention here, because it's something that I look forward to tremendously. As an aerospace engineer, previously I've been involved with building spacecraft, and now I'm going to have the opportunity to launch some Danish-built spacecraft into orbit about the Earth. There's a couple universities here in Denmark and a company that they've built these miniature CubeSats, they're called. I'll bring them up to the space station, and by using the Japanese airlock and the space station robotic arm, I'll be able to place them into orbit and hopefully take some pictures of these Danish spacecraft leaving the space station and then starting their own separate science mission. So that's a fantastic opportunity that I'm really looking forward to. On top of that, well, also hopefully start I'll hopefully have the opportunity to prepare a Danish experiment that should be launched in 2016. If we get this slide working, it's quite interesting. In 2016, a Danish experiment will be launched to the space station, which will be installed on the outside of Columbus.
Move your laptop and she will click for you.
Okay.
Continue.
Yeah, so as I was saying, in next year, a Danish experiment called ASIM will launch. It's called the Atmosphere Space Interactions Monitor. It's a Danish-led experiment. Researchers at DTU Space are behind the science. Therma, a Danish company, is the prime contractor. And it's, well, for me, I think, and for a lot of researchers, a very exciting project, because it's going to look at some of these giant lightning strikes that instead of hitting the Earth, they actually travel up to space, and they can reach all the way up to an altitude of about 80 or 90 kilometers. And it's something that we haven't been aware of for a long time, because obviously during a thunderstorm, most of us spend our time below the clouds, so we don't really see what happens above it. But there are actually these really gigantic lightning strikes that shoot upwards, and we're talking about a tremendous amount of energy that's released into the atmosphere, which could have a large effect on the composition of the atmosphere. So by understanding some of these effects that occur during thunderstorms above the thunderstorm, hopefully we'll get a better understanding of some of the weather patterns that happen here on Earth. We can go to the next one. Okay, so here, if you could, yeah, maybe I have to go do that, because it's actually a little video that's going to start. If you move the mouse down to the left corner, no, go back to the next slide. Yeah. And there should be a little play button. On top of that, the ISS, of course, also is a fantastic place to, so it should start, for outreach opportunities, educational opportunities to teach kids.
Can you ask the photographers to sit down for a while?
Is there a little play button down there? Yeah. And it should just load.
International Space Station. We're doing a reboost right now, but we're showing that the space station is actually accelerating away from us. We're going to float to the middle of the cabin, and it started already.
So even no.
Stop. Turn the camera. And we get moved. The space station is accelerating, leaving us behind.
So this is actually, so normally the space station is at an altitude of 400 kilometers, and even though we consider that to be space, there's still enough of an atmosphere to pull the space station towards Earth. So every few months, maybe a couple times a year, we have to boost the altitude of the space station again, and they do that by firing the rockets at the end. And what you see here are actually the effects of that rocket firing, which pushes the space, sort of the whole space station past the astronauts who are themselves weightless. So the astronauts in this case are actually free falling about the Earth, and the space station is getting pushed behind them. So something as a video like this, which is a tremendous, or a lot of fun to watch, is also a great tool to teach kids about the principles of physics. So even though we spend a lot of our time doing very, very serious science, once in a while we also have time for a little bit of fun. And you see here is this person, this is Sergei Volkov, and he will actually be one of my crewmates. He's the Russian commander of the Soyuz when I launch, so I'll be flying with him into space. This will be his third mission. And so this whole past week I actually spent in simulations with him in Star City. Working together, him as commander, me as his co-pilot. And you can see as soon as they stop the engines, then the space station becomes sort of properly weightless again, just like the astronauts on board. But something as simple as this is a great tool for teachers to use to teach their students about the effects of weightlessness, even go on. Of course, there's no real way to experience weightlessness for prolonged periods of time on Earth, unfortunately. We do not have a room that we can go into and turn off gravity and free float, even though we'd all love to have a room like that. The only way to experience weightlessness here on Earth is to get on board an aircraft and do a parabolic flight, also called a zero-G flight. And it's, as you can see here, this is the interior of Airbus A300 that flies out of Bordeaux in France, an aircraft that ESA has together with DLR, the German space agency, and CNES, the French space agency. And it's not just about having fun. It's actually also a training tool that we use. If you go on to the next, and here I have a little video as well. That if you could, just the same procedures before, down in the bottom left corner, there should be a play button. Yeah. Because something as simple as first aid can be tremendously difficult in a weightless environment. I mean, if the astronaut, if you suffer a heart attack and you need to do CPR, how do you do CPR in weightlessness? And one of the ways you can do it is by putting your feet on the ceiling and using the reaction off your feet to push down. And this is one of the things that we train on board these parabolic flights. But of course, you don't want to hit the ground, so you only get about 25 seconds worth of weightlessness. So it's not, unfortunately, enough for all the different requirements that we have for training. So in order to train for longer, no, you can. That's fine. We train for spacewalks, EVAs, in underwater. And we have a gigantic pool at the Johnson Space Center at NASA where we can train for up to 6 hours for these spacewalks. And Alex, here a couple days ago when he was out on his spacewalk, I think he was outside for just under 6 hours and 15 minutes. And obviously you can't do that on board an aircraft that's free falling. So we work underwater and we use the buoyancy force of the water to mimic weightlessness. And so I've also spent a lot of my time training at the Johnson Space Center for EVAs. You can go on. But in general, and maybe we can turn off the lights completely here because these next couple pictures are going to get very dark. In general, it's very, very difficult to train for space here on Earth. And one of the few ways that we have by doing it is using what's called analog missions. One of the analog missions that the European Space Agency runs is a program called CAVES, where we travel to Sardinia and we travel a couple kilometers underneath the ground, and we live there for a week as a team of international astronauts. I was on this mission 3 years ago now, and we were 6 international astronauts, and we spent a week exploring the cave, mapping the cave, collecting biological samples, trying to run as realistically as possible a real space mission. And you go on. And so this kind of mimics some of the stressful psychological factors that we might experience in space, being away from our friends and family, not having a day-night cycle. We didn't see the sun for a whole week, living in a situation that we're not used to, and then of course having to work together closely with a multinational crew. Go ahead. And this is just a fantastic experience. I mean, you know, going into space will of course be the highlight, but just the last 6 years in themselves have been a fantastic opportunity. Really, I've experienced so many unique things. I mean, to walk, you know, a couple kilometers underneath the surface of the Earth and to suddenly see a beautiful lake like this is really a tremendous experience. Another opportunity that I've had now 2 years in a row is to participate in NASA's NEMO mission. Again, this is an analog mission where we try to simulate a real space mission. This time it's underwater, about 20 meters underwater off the coast of Florida in the Aquarius habitat. So it's about the size of a bus, and we're 6 people living inside. And then during the day, we can not only work inside the habitat as we would on board the space station, but we can also go for simulated spacewalks outside using this diving helmets. And again, we're outside for about 4 hours simulating a spacewalk. And here, some of the things that we were testing were the future techniques that we might use on the surface of an asteroid one day. And of course, inside we can work like we would on board the space station. This year it was a fantastic opportunity to test some of the technology that I'll be bringing into space. So some of the mobile technology that hopefully in the future we'll use to let the astronauts work more efficiently. We were able to test in the Aquarius reef base. And of course there's also more serious aspects to it. Survival training in case the Soyuz doesn't land where we expect it to. We need to be trained in all aspects of survival, and that includes of course Russian winter survival. If we land in the middle of winter and there's a snowstorm and the rescuers can't get to us, we have to be able to survive for a day or two before we return home safely. And I can tell you this is a very cold experience at minus 20 degrees having to spend 2 nights outside. And then finally, one of the most important tools that we have on board the space station is the Canadian-built robotic arm. And I've also spent a tremendous amount of time working with that. And this is the arm that I'll be using to release the Danish CubeSats into orbit from the space station. But it also serves a lot of other important purposes during EVAs. A couple days ago when Alex was on his EVA, he was attached to the end. He didn't go all the way out to the solar panel that we see here, but they were using it to move him around with some payloads. And of course, this is one of the ways that we catch the unmanned cargo ships that bring cargo up to the space station. They approach to about 10 meters, and then the astronauts use a robotic arm to grab the cargo ships and dock them to the space station. So this is just a brief overview of my mission and some of the training that I've been through in the last 6 years in preparation for the space flight. There's a lot of more information, both in Danish on isaastronaut.dk. There's also a lot of social media content on andreasmogensen.isa.int. And then I regularly use Twitter and YouTube. So a lot of opportunity to get involved in the mission, which Nigel will talk more about briefly. But just before I get to Nigel, one of the purposes of today is also to reveal the logos for my mission, the mission patches. We've had a competition where we received so many good suggestions for logos that it was almost impossible to pick just one, and luckily ESA gave me the opportunity to actually pick two, and one of the ones that we picked is our education patch, which we will use for all of the competition and educational outreach opportunities. I mean, we all just thought this patch was so cute that we couldn't resist using it. And at this point, I'll hand over to Nigel, and then at the end, I'll go back and reveal the winning patch that I'll actually use on my spacesuit and as a symbol throughout my entire mission.
Okay, thank you very much. If you just give us a little bit of time so that we can swap computers, and I don't know if the cable is going to be long enough.
What? Oh, in my bag.
Is it long enough? Whilst we're doing that, I'd just like to introduce to you all this little fellow here. His name is Paxi, and he's ESA Education's ambassador for STEM. So everywhere that ESA goes in terms of press announcements like this one, Paxi follows. And on his website, which is esa.intkids, Paxi explains ESA's activities in simple terms that can be digested by the younger generation. So he's here to follow you.
And he even came with us in caves underground in Sardinia
he follows you everywhere. He's a
and
stalker.
underwater during Nemo.
Okay, so just a few seconds of. It's not a lucky day with the VGA. Okay, so as Andreas just showed, this was the patch that we decided to use for the education activities, and in fact we liked it so much that we started abusing it, and we used it for all the programs. So this is just a quick outline of some of the activities that we're doing. The education activities that ESA is involved in for all astronaut missions, and Andreas is no exception, needs the support of a lot of national organizations and education agencies. So I'd just like to flash up the main players in the education program of Andreas here, with the Ministry of Higher Education and Science, in particular the House of Natural Sciences, and the two big funders for the project. So ESA is a European space agency, but in order to get the message to the children at national level, we really need the support of all these agencies. So I've done my blah blah for the people who are involved, and now I want to talk to you a little bit about why we're doing it. So ESA has a mandate to enable literacy in young students in science, technology, education, and mathematics. One of the problems that we've encountered is a decline in uptake of science and technology in the younger students. So it really is now our duty to try and increase that literacy, and to inspire students. Of course, I mean the goal of increasing literacy is to try and get them into STEM careers. And these are sort of objectives that I think all the partners who are involved in the education program of Andreas share. And of course, as Andreas already alluded to, increase awareness of space research and the benefits of space research for Earth and everyday life in modern society. So the first competition that I want to discuss is the primary competition. We're very lucky to have LEGO Education on board supporting this particular activity, and I'm not going to speak Danish, so I'll just call it LEGO competition. It's a competition that we're releasing for national, so Danish children aged 6 to 10 years old, and essentially we're asking them to research about the International Space Station. So spend some time with your teachers looking into a human space flight and the space station, and then devise or select an aspect that you like, and you have to build it. You build it out of Lego. You have to make a video of it. You upload it to YouTube, and Andreas, amongst others, will also will choose the winning entries. And once he's in the space station, he will announce the winning team. And the prize, of course, after is a visit of the winning team school. And Lego Education have been very nice in providing some education kit as well that they can donate to the school. So as Andreas said, we just go to esaastronaut.dk for the information there. This will be released, all the rules and regulations and everything that the teachers need to know about in terms of background will be posted on this website. I should also add that throughout the spring, our partners have managed to coordinate some events whereby schools will be invited to planetarium, science museum, etc., specifically for this competition. So we're very excited about that, and all the details of where to go for the schools will be on the website. So yeah, next slide. So for slightly older kids, well, we're no longer kids now, we're students really, we're 11 till 19 years old. We've launching a space robotics competition. This is not solely for the Danish crowds, but for the ESA member states. And the call is for these students to build a robot out of any material that they find is suitable to perform a dedicated task that we will set them in an ISS mock-up. The process is not so much just build it and test it. It's actually very much like industry interacts with ESA. So we're teaching them how to think about the design and the engineering steps that are required in order to build space gear. So we have these design reviews, and then we also have interviews with a panel of experts, robotics experts, who will quiz and grill the student teams. And the exciting part is the culmination of the event, of course, which is the finals in the Netherlands, where they'll not only meet Andreas, who'll be there as well, supervising the activities, but also be able to test their robot in the mock-up. And again, this competition will be announced in January on the esaastronaut.dk website, and also on our website. So all the rules and regulations will be available also in Danish. So next slide. Okay, so this is a very nice activity also. This is the DR competition, and this is open to the Danish general public. And we're giving them the opportunity to design an experiment, a fairly simple experiment, but as Andreas just showed, it doesn't take very complicated or expensive equipment to demonstrate some very nice physics principles. So we're giving the audience a limited number of items: paper, water, scissors, tape, etc., to come up with an experiment. The rules and regulations will be released today, I believe at 11:45 on the DR website, and I'm not going to massacre Rumracen, something like that perhaps. But that's the website where all the information can be dug out for that. So the deadline for the inputs is going to be early April, and the reason why it's so far in advance of Andreas's mission is because we need to actually do some safety tests on the assembled products, etc. So the experiment will go through the normal ISS experiment processes. Okay, well, I don't need to dwell too much on this because, as you can see, Andreas and I coordinated very well our presentations. But just to say that Andreas will be launching one CubeSat built by university students from Aalborg University. This is a 1-unit CubeSat, just a little 10 centimeter cube. And this is part of ESA's long-running Fly Your Satellite program. So ESA actually follows the students and helps them in the engineering and the building process, and also in the testing. So the teams follow a rigorous off-gassing, shaking tests. Anything that a normal satellite would go through, the students are given the opportunity to come on site in Holland and test it. And just to give you a quick background on what the satellite will do, it's all very nice launching a satellite, but what will it do? AUSat-5 is the AIS system, so it will be tracking ships on the ocean. And if you need more information about that program, I've put up the websites there. Okay, so we've tackled students from primary, secondary and tertiary education, but I think it's also important to address the teachers. So ISRO is an office supported by national organizations and ESA, and they have prepared some dedicated space and classroom workshops where the teachers can learn how to introduce space into their classroom. Again, I have to reiterate that ESA is not trying to teach the kids themselves. We're helping the professional teachers introduce space into the classroom. So a lot of workshops for the teachers there, and the website is also up there. So we're essentially tackling the whole range of education. So Mission X, this is something, well, there you go. Actually, you can see Andreas is sitting right here. His head is not that small. And this is, he looks small there because it's an optical effect. So there you go. There's science in the making. But this is a program that's been running for now for 4 years. And it's run by NASA and ESA and a lot of various space agencies around the world. It's open to 8 to 12-year-olds. And it's using the training program of astronauts, the physical training program of astronauts, to try and get young kids to do some exercise and be a little bit more healthy in their daily routines. So there's different modules that are more sports orientated and some modules that are more science and nutrition orientated. This is actually a really great opportunity for Danish children to participate in the next increment of Mission X, which starts in February and ends in March. And this is the website to go to if you want to participate. There's approximately 25,000 children around the world participating in this program, so it's really growing every year at a tremendous rate. Zero robotics now. So Andreas will be flying in September 2015, and in September 2015 we're also launching this competition. Again, it's open to the global community, not just Denmark, and it involves 16 to 20-year-olds. And we invite them to code satellites which are present on the ISS, and so they have to essentially, in the environment of a game, make satellites move in a three-dimensional setup that we put them. So it's a tactical game, and every year the game changes. And the really exciting part about this competition is essentially the final, where the code that the students have written for the 3 months of the competition gets to be operated on the space station. And there you see there's an image of a previous astronaut doing just that for the competition. So the next competition, as I said, kicks off when Andreas is on the station, so I'm sure he'll be supporting that activity very well. That's it. It's actually a very short mission, 10 days, but I think we've crammed about more educational programs than a long duration mission. So I think, again, I want to thank the partners who are involved. And these are the main websites that you need to look at if you're interested. You can always ask me questions or email me. The main point of contact for Denmark is Maiken Lolke, and from the House of Natural Sciences, she's behind there. And we have a representative of LEGO Education who came today as well to support. So if you have any questions for him, please by all means go for it.
The last one is incorrect. That should be one person.
Yeah.
Yes, again, I apologise, I have to change that.
I thought you were fluent.
Yes, no, that's not right. Okay. Yes, apologies. So there we go. I pass it back to Andreas, who I believe is now
Thanks.
going to present the logo of the mission.
We just need to do the computer swap again. All right, well, in the winter and spring of this year, ESA launched a competition to find the name of my mission. It was a European-wide competition, and an Italian student, a university student, also studying aerospace engineer, came up with the winning name, which is Iris or Iris, which combines the name of the Greek god Iris with ISS. And well, this is a fantastic name for the mission, I think, because it really catches the spirit of not only the International Space Station, but also my mission. Iris, of course, was the Greek goddess who served as a messenger to the gods. So in that sense, she represents the link between earth and heavens. At the same time, she's also the personification of the rainbow. And of course, the rainbow is a symbol of peace and friendship. And the International Space Station really, not only is it a fantastic scientific laboratory, but it's also a great international partnership, which has served as a sort of link between, well, a lot of nations on this earth. Just 30 years ago, the Cold War was still running strong, but today we have a lot of countries working side by side on a daily basis. So really the International Space Station is a fantastic symbol of international cooperation. But that was just kind of to give you a little bit of background, because since the spring, we launched a logo competition through the Danish website ESA Astronaut DK. It was a competition just for internally in Denmark. And I'm really pleased with the results of the competition. We had more than 120 suggestions, really great suggestions. In fact, so many good ones that we ended up selecting two. You've already seen the education logo, which was designed by Louise Nielsen. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but I really think it's a great logo, and I'll sign one for her here in just a second. But the winning logo, which I'll have stitched onto my spacesuit, and which I'll be wearing during launch and landing on Soyuz, and which will represent the mission throughout now and until I come back, is a design that I'm very pleased about. It's designed by Paul Rasmussen, who's here with us today, and I think it really captures, well, a lot of the suggestions that we have represented Iris through the rainbow, but Paul decided to take a slightly different approach. He took the wings of Iris and put them around the globe with the Danish flag, and in that sense, not only represents kind of the transition from Earth to space, but it also represents a Viking ship. And of course, a Viking ship is a really important piece of not only Danish but Scandinavian culture. It's a symbol of sort of our ancestors' need for exploration. They traveled maybe even as far as North America. So in that sense, it captures that same spirit of exploration that we have today on board the space station. And what I also like is just the I don't want to say simple, but the clean design. I think it's a fantastic logo, and I'm very pleased. I also like that there's 6 stars. The number 6 has a lot of different meanings. Not only are we 6 European astronauts that started in 2009, we in fact started on the 1st of September 2009, and I'll launch on the 1st of September 2015. So exactly 6 years to the day that I started as an astronaut, I'll launch into space. So say it represents a star for each year between starting as an astronaut and launching into space. So I really want to thank Paul for traveling all this way. I think he actually came all the way from Canada to be here with us today. Really, I'm proud. I'll be very proud to wear this on my spacesuit. So, thank you. And I'll sign one for both Paul and Louise. Måske could be Paul to come up.
Maybe you should walk next to that
Yeah.
ISS so you can get a picture of it.
Tak for deltagelsen. Tak for det flotte design.
Ja.
So let's move on. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Nigel. We now have some time to ask questions to both Nigel and Andreas. Please address your question with your name and your affiliation. Yes, please.
This is both to Nigel and to Andreas. Michelle Rasmussen from Executive Intelligence Review in Washington. We have an economic crisis now, and in the United States, the space program is really being sacrificed with massive cutbacks. At the same time, we have China, who just went to the moon. They want to mine helium-3 for nuclear fusion in the future. India has just gone to Mars, the first nation to come on the first try. And the Prime Minister Modi has said there's no dichotomy between conquering poverty and recreating scientific and technological progress. In fact, the one is dependent on the other, and they are trying to mobilize their youth to engage in both quests. So I want to ask a more philosophical question. Why, during crisis times, is it so important to continue reaching for the stars?
Well, I mean, maybe I want to start by saying that I'm actually quite optimistic about the future. I know there's a lot of talk about, you know, the space shuttle being retired several years ago by NASA, but it's actually, I think, a very interesting time. NASA recently just announced contract awards for two companies, SpaceX and Boeing, that hopefully in the next few years will start launching astronauts from US soil again. We're also using the ISS as a test bed for future technologies. And one of the things that we're spending a lot of time at right now is talking about the future, what will happen after ISS if we go to the moon, to the asteroids, or Mars. So I think it's actually a very exciting time to be part of human spaceflight. We also, as you mentioned, we're seeing China come onto the scene, and it's one of the things that we're actually working on within the European Space Agency is cooperation with China. So if we're lucky, maybe we'll see a European astronaut in the future fly to the Chinese space station that they're talking about building. Now, in terms of using spaceflight to inspire the younger generation, I think it's a very, very good point that you make, because it's certainly where our future lies, and I think a lot of countries are aware of that, also within Europe. A lot of European countries have increased their contribution to spaceflight. I mean, perhaps the biggest example is the UK, which last year increased their overall contribution to ESA by, I think, 25%. So I think it's, of course, I wish more countries would follow, because I think always we can use more money in human spaceflight. But I'm quite optimistic about where we are right now, especially, both in human spaceflight, I would say, but also in terms of Earth observation. We see a lot of interesting work being done there, a lot of interesting satellites. Here in Europe, we had just in the past year Swarm being launched, where Denmark also was a big contributor to. So the principal investigators of Swarm are out at D2 Space. We have, of course, Galileo, the European GPS, starting. The satellites are slowly being put into orbit, and we also have a series of satellites that are going to be launched that will help to further observe the Earth and to help with the security of Europe in the future. So I think there's a lot of work being done, and I think in the future, I think, you know, through some of the educational programs that we're running, I think I can't but imagine that kids won't find it interesting and be more and more enthusiastic about space, because it's an area that I myself am very, very fascinated by and have been since I was a little kid. So hopefully the work that we do will help inspire the next generation.
Yeah, I can only second what Andreas said. You know, ESA understands that there's a workforce to fulfill in the long term, and our goal is to try and feed that workforce. And it's an investment into the future. I mean, these education programs inspire and they open the eyes of the kids to what's out there for them, and we have to reverse this trend that I mentioned a little bit before in my presentation. So we feel it as a duty really to try and use astronauts and the space station to try and get that wow, you know. And Andreas mentioned the UK investment increase, and the minister was very clear. I mean, he said he wants to have the Apollo effect. Because you look at the data, after big space programs, the kids take up much more to science, to engineering, and to mathematics. So it's something that we try. It's hard to get there, but try as we might, we will. So we're not going for an Apollo effect here, I don't think, but certainly to try do the first step and to get those kids to actually know that there's a space station, know that there's a Danish astronaut, and then once the doors are open, it's anybody's world.
And I'm quite pleased also with the development just here in Denmark. You know, when I graduated from high school back in 1995, I ended up going to London to Imperial College to study aeronautical engineering because there wasn't really a similar program of study here in Denmark. But now we have at D2 Space, we have a dedicated science and engineering program that's focused on space flight and on Earth observation. And I think, as far as I know, it's you know, subscribed to at the maximum level each year. So there definitely is a very clear interest in space. You know, in Denmark, I'm not sure if a lot of you have seen, but there's also a lot of work being done together with NASA. Here last year, a group from D2 Space, they have a couple star cameras on a NASA mission, Juno, and they actually took a little film using their star cameras as they flew past the Earth and the Moon on what's called a gravity assist, a slingshot, and it's a fantastic video to see as this spacecraft in black and white shoots past the Earth and the Moon. So there's definitely a lot of interest that I've also felt myself here in the last few years when I come back to Denmark to speak about spaceflight.
More questions? Yes.
You mentioned work on one of the scientific missions would be about asteroids. What will you be working on about that?
No, it's one of the possible future destinations. Right now, the International Space Station will continue at least until 2020. Discussions are underway to extend its lifetime to 2024, maybe even 2028. In 2028, the space station will be 30 years old. But even if we continue until 2028, it's important that we already now start working on the future beyond ISS. And so the discussion really is whether or not we should return to the Moon first, if we should go to an asteroid, or maybe directly to Mars. Of course, NASA, one of the mission concepts that NASA is studying is what they call the asteroid redirect mission, where they would actually capture a smaller asteroid, bring it into orbit around the moon, and then maybe send astronauts there to study the surface composition. Asteroids and comets are incredibly interesting objects because they are in many ways artifacts of the early solar system before the planets formed. So by studying their composition, we can learn about the past state of the solar system before the planets found, maybe understand exactly what elements were present. There's some studies that suggest that there are amino acids on some of these comets, and they really form the building blocks of life. And here, I want to mention the Rosetta, because the European Space Agency launched a mission, is it 10 years ago? 10 years ago, this spacecraft called Rosetta, which has been traveling through the solar system, and just about a month ago, it arrived at a comet, which unfortunately has an unpronounceable name.
Cherminchenko.
No, Churyumov-Gerasimenko.
Well, you practiced.
But it's arrived and is now in orbit about this comet. And on the 12th of November, 11th of November, it has a little lander that it'll deploy, and the lander, with the help of a harpoon, will attach itself and land on the comet, and then take some surface samples and study the comet. So it's a fantastic mission. One of the first times that a spacecraft has gone into orbit about a comet, and will attempt to land on it. And so far, there's been some fantastic pictures released by ESA. So I'll definitely suggest that you have a look on ESA's website for that. It's a very, very interesting mission.
It's more or less a day-to-day update on that mission.
And especially on the 11th of November, when we attempt to land for the first time on a comet, will be very, very interesting.
Yes.
This is more political because you spoke before about the importance of these missions for increasing international cooperation. Yet we're in a political situation where, in the United States at least, the cooperation because of the sanctions policy between NASA and the Russian space agency is being put down. There are some cooperation agreements that are continuing, but others that have been canceled. And do you have something to say about the importance of maintaining this cooperation and not allowing it to be eroded because of political considerations?
Well, especially in this case, I think the International Space Station is a perfect example because really ISS wouldn't be able to exist without both the participation of the US and Russia. So in that sense, we have to work together, and we are working together. It's, as far as I'm aware, not an area where we feel any of the sanctions, and the space station wouldn't be able to continue without it. I mean, right now the only way to get to the space station is with the Russian Soyuz. On the same time, a lot of the vital systems on board, for example, the solar panels are on the American side. So really, it's a very, very close collaboration. And if that were to break down, well, there would be no space station. And we don't see any sign of that happening. So really, projects like the space station help us ensure that we do continue, because it's very easy to end up in a situation where suddenly communication breaks down. But we have on a daily basis, we have communication on all levels. I mean, from the ministerial level all the way down to the technicians and the engineers who discuss daily on the ongoing operations. So it's a way, like many other scientific programs during the Cold War, it's a way to ensure mutual understanding and mutual cooperation and communication, because it's only through daily communication and cooperation that we break through the stereotypes, and that we learn to see each other on a human level rather than on a sort of a rhetorical level where political slogans come into play. But so So I think the space station, in this sense, is a perfect example of the cooperation that we need in the future to ensure that the peace continues.
Maybe, sorry, just to add on, it's not quite as political as what Andreas just spoke, but certainly for the Zero Robotics competition that's been running for several years now, which is a US-led and European participation is very high in this program as well. And for the first year, Roscosmos are supporting several Russian student teams to participate in this program. So I think, certainly as far as education is concerned, if you have a common goal, then you can ignore the political barriers that could impede you. So I'm really happy that the Russian teams will be participating this year. It's something that we've been trying for, I think, almost 3 years now to get them on board. So, but and it's really nice to see that the education can see past that possible barrier between the nations.
I had a question there.
Hi, one with the economic related. I have a question about the medicine study in the space station. Given the recent breakout of Ebola epidemic in Africa, and we have 2 cases in Europe, will there be any study about the new medicine in the space station in next year's mission?
I mean, there's a lot of studies going on. I mentioned already the Danish researchers had sent cancer cells into space to understand some of the mechanisms that turn human cells cancerous. There's also been some very interesting work with regards to salmonella bacteria, and some of the work that we've done on board the space station, studying why salmonella bacteria become more dangerous in space has sort of helped us on the way to a vaccine against salmonella. So certainly there's a lot of very, very interesting research going on. NASA is also starting a very big program of research involving mice on board the space station. So that'll be, it's starting here slowly over the next few years, so that'll be very interesting to follow. So hopefully, I mean, who really knows what comes out of that, but it's a lot of very interesting research oriented towards health and to understanding how cells, both human cells, but also bacteria and viruses, how they sort of develop both in space and here on Earth.
Jeg hedder Charlotte, jeg kommer fra BT, og vil gerne høre, hvad det betyder for dig at være den første danske astronaut i rummet.
Jamen altså, det er selvfølgelig en kæmpe ære at være den første. Og jeg tror også, det har en klar betydning med hensyn til den interesse, der er, både fra medierne og offentligheden selvfølgelig. Så det er en stor opportunity for os, for ligesom at få børn og unge involveret, og ligesom få vores budskab ud. Men altså personligt, så har det aldrig været et mål for mig at være den første. Det er så noget, som hvad man sige, næsten en tilfældighed mere. Fordi for mig, om jeg var den første eller den anden astronaut eller den 10. det ville ikke gøre så stor en forskel. Men selvfølgelig det er jo en rigtig god måde at bruge den større interesse, der er i forbindelse med at være den første til at få budskabet ud til alle og virkelig få involveret børn og unge i missionen.
Har det været en drengedrøm for dig?
Jamen det har det helt sikkert. Det har det været. Det har været så stor en drøm, at jeg har altid vidst, at chancen for at blive astronaut var minimal. Så derfor ville jeg gerne, selvom jeg ikke blev astronaut, arbejde med rumfart, så derfor valgte jeg så at blive rumfartsingeniør. Og så var jeg så bare så heldig, at jeg fik muligheden for at søge ind til ESA, og for rent faktisk blev optaget.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
Hvordan er det at samarbejde med russerne? Kan du fortælle lidt, hvor svært er det sprogligt og andre ting?
Altså, jeg havde aldrig forestillet mig, inden jeg blev astronaut, at russisk ville være en af de ting, som jeg skulle bruge mest tid på. Fordi alt det, vi laver i Rusland, fra undervisningen til altså de simuleringer, vi kører ombord på Soyuz, til selve opsendelsen og landingen, alt foregår på russisk. Så det er en af de ting, som vi har brugt rigtig, rigtig, rigtig meget tid på, netop at lære russisk. Men altså, sådan mere personligt, så kan jeg sige, at det har været rigtig, rigtig spændende at komme til Star City, fordi man kan, man kan mærke den historie, der har været. Altså Star City er den by, som ligger lidt uden for Moskva, som blev grundlagt tilbage i 50'erne, hvor de første sovjetiske kosmonauter, også Yuri Gagarin, de startede deres træning, og de boede. Og det startede som en hemmelig militærby ude i skoven, som det skulle sørge eller sikre, at alt hvad der skete derude var hemmeligt, og amerikanerne ikke fik det at vide. Nu er det så blevet en mere offentlig by, men det er stadigvæk der, hvor al træningen foregår. Så det er rigtig, rigtig spændende og ligesom at kunne se, hvor Gagarin startede sin karriere, og hvor alle de russiske og sovjetiske kosmonauter har boet og trænet.
Okay, thank you for coming here and attending today. There is time for individual interviews with Andreas and Nigel, but I also would like to introduce Cecilia Turner from the ministry, sitting down there, and Michael, who is also working together with Nigel on the educational activities. And we have this Lego education period also here today. Before we leave, I also want to mention one thing from you that we learned from the ministry. When Andreas is at the Kulturnatten at the ministry tonight, the minister has said that she will come and visit him where he stands between 6 o'clock and 6:20. So please feel free to come there. There's photo opportunities and to see they're greeting each other. So with that, I would just like to round up and also